Look at me. Don't I deserve to look my best at such an important corporate event? Sarah's voice quivered with tension as she tried on yet another dress in front of our bedroom mirror. I tore my eyes away from my laptop, where I'd been checking work emails, and glanced at my wife. The black cocktail dress fit her perfectly, accentuating every curve of her figure. Sarah, I tried to keep my voice steady. It's just the company's Christmas party. A mere formality. Besides, it's freezing outside, 15 degrees. Just, she spun around, her eyes flashing. This is the event of the year. All the executives will be there, all the important clients. And Mark specifically asked that I. At the mention of her boss, I felt something unpleasant twist inside me. Mark Anderson, the successful owner of their construction company, a self-assured, handsome man in his mid-40s, had been appearing far too frequently in my wife's conversations lately. Sarah was now fastening an elegant white gold necklace, my gift from our last wedding anniversary, while critically examining her reflection. "It'll be warm in the hotel," she declared in a tone that brooked no argument. "And honestly, you could show a bit more support. This is important for my career, which means it's important for us." I shut my laptop. Work could wait. We needed to get ready. Though the thought of the upcoming evening filled me with nothing but irritation. These endless conversations about square footage, investments, and promising projects bored me to death, especially when Mark would launch into his endless monologues about how he'd risen from a simple site manager to company owner. The luxurious lobby of the Grand Riverside Hotel welcomed us with soft lighting and the sounds of a jazz band. Christmas lights twinkled everywhere, and the air was filled with the scent of pine. Company employees gathered in small groups, discussing the latest office gossip and holiday plans. "Sarah, you look absolutely stunning tonight," a velvet baritone called out behind us. I turned around. Her boss, Mark, impeccable in a navy blue suit, was already striding across the lobby toward us. His well-groomed face wore a broad smile, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. "Thank you, Mark." Sarah beamed. "You look wonderful as always." "Good evening," I said dryly, but the boss barely acknowledged me with a nod. "Sarah, we need to discuss the new project." He smoothly took her by the elbow. "You don't mind if I steal your wife for a few minutes?" Without waiting for my response, they were already heading toward the bar. I stood alone, feeling like an outsider at this celebration of life. Ordering a whiskey, I settled at a corner table with a good view of the dance floor. Sarah and Mark were engaged in animated conversation, leaning closer to each other than propriety demanded. "Our Sarah's positively glowing tonight," a woman's voice said beside me. It was Linda from accounting, the office's notorious gossip. Yes, noticeably, I took a sip of whiskey, not taking my eyes off my wife. "Word is she's up for a promotion." "To commercial director," Linda said meaningfully. "Is that so?" "She hasn't mentioned it." The evening dragged on painfully. I watched as Sarah danced with her boss, laughed at his jokes, constantly touching his arm. Something unpleasant churned in my chest, but I told myself this was just normal office socializing. Around 11, I went out to smoke in the winter garden. The ornamental bushes created cozy, secluded spots, and in one of them, I heard muffled voices. "You understand that such decisions aren't made lightly." Mark's insinuating voice sounded insistent and demanding. "Mark, Sarah's voice trembled. "I really want this position, but I've been married for 7 years. I understand what you're implying, but it feels wrong." "Come on," irritation crept into his voice. "You're making this complicated. We're talking about one evening, one time. That's all. I'm not going to interfere with your domestic bliss. Just tell your computer geek husband you have a meeting. Then go back to living with your tech guy till you're old and gray. Think about it. New position. Completely different income. You're a smart woman, Sarah. Are a few hours in a hotel really worth throwing away such a future?" "Mark, I deeply respect you, of course. But what you're suggesting? Well, let's just imagine, for a moment, that I agree. You really promise that everything will go back to normal afterward, and it will be just this once." "Of course," his voice softened. "It's just a pleasant formality. A small concession for a big goal. Just one evening. No obligations, no sequel. Look, I can't have people around me whom I don't know inside and out. Consider it an initiation into the inner circle. But, fine. His tone turned harsh. You have until tomorrow to think about it. Either we meet at the Marriott and you become commercial director, or, well, you get it. Your choice, career or vegetating as some IT guy's wife. You're not the only one in our company eyeing this position. A heavy silence fell. I could almost physically feel Sarah being torn between desire and duty. I'll think about it, she finally managed. We drove home in complete silence. Sarah nervously fidgeted with her phone, lost in thought, while I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to control the emotions raging inside. Finally, we reached home. Nathan, we need to talk, Sarah began vaguely, not daring to meet my eyes. A heavy silence hung in the entryway. I slowly unbuttoned my coat, feeling rage boiling inside. The whiskey in my head had turned to molten lead. On listening, my voice came out hoarse. What's so important at 2 in the morning? I don't know about you, but I'm tired of your colleagues and want to sleep. Tomorrow, she faltered, tomorrow I have a very important meeting. For my career. You want me to grow professionally, don't you? With your boss, Mark? I let out a short laugh. Sarah flinched. With him. You know something. She finally raised confused eyes to me. I have a pretty good idea. And what exactly do you want to hear from me? Each word dripped with venom, but she seemed not to notice. You see, he suggested I spend one evening with him. Just sit in a restaurant and talk so he can get to know me better. It doesn't mean anything. Just one evening. Her voice became hurried, pleading. For our future. We could buy a new house, a car. It's such an opportunity. I stared at her, not believing my ears. Was she serious? 7 years of marriage, and here she stood before me, essentially asking permission to cheat, as if it were just another business meeting. Oh, well, if it's for your career and just sitting in a restaurant. I stretched my lips into a smile, feeling something breaking inside. Of course, darling. We absolutely must accommodate such an important boss. Why not? After all, it's such an opportunity. My voice rang with undisguised sarcasm, each word soaked in bitterness and mockery. But Sarah, consumed by thoughts of career advancement, seemed not to notice this poison. Really? Her face brightened. You really understand. Absolutely. I threw my hands up theatrically. Just be sure to dress nicely, put on makeup. Wouldn't want you to ruin such a business evening. I don't want to be embarrassed by my wife. I practically spat out the last words, but Sarah, already immersed in thoughts about her upcoming promotion, only beamed, apparently taking my sarcasm for sincere support. Thank you, honey. I knew you'd understand. She reached to kiss my cheek, but I sharply pulled away and headed for the stairs, feeling something dark and terrible boiling up inside. I went upstairs, leaving her standing in the entryway. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief, missing the dangerous glint in my eyes and taking the sarcasm for genuine agreement. She couldn't know that this evening had set in motion a terrible chain of events that could no longer be stopped. The next evening, I sat at my computer, staring mindlessly at the monitor. Lines of code blurred before my eyes. What time was it? 6, 7. After a sleepless night, time had lost all meaning. The thought kept pulsing in my temples. What the hell happened at that stupid corporate party? Maybe it was just a stupid joke, and Sarah would call any minute laughing. Honey, you didn't think I was serious. Outside, darkness was creeping over our suburban neighborhood, wrapping the houses in a damp fog. Gusty wind shook bare tree branches as if hurrying time along, but the clock hands seemed frozen in place. I checked my phone for the 100th time. No calls, no messages. Sarah should have been home from work 2 hours ago. Or, she must really be working late. I said aloud and winced at the falseness in my voice. The pit in my stomach deepened at this pathetic attempt to fool myself. Her words from last night kept spinning in my head. Just one evening. For our future. I tried to push away thoughts of what she might be doing right now, tried to convince myself this was some ridiculous misunderstanding, but my imagination helpfully supplied images that made me feel sick to my stomach. No, I kept telling myself my wife couldn't have. She couldn't seriously. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. My heart leaped, but it was just a weather alert. Warning: ice storm expected in the greater Boston area. Something snapped inside me then. My fingers automatically found the Marriott address in the navigation app. 30 minutes away. If I left now, I threw on my jacket and bolted from the house. The first drops of freezing rain hit the windshield as I pulled out of the driveway. The wipers smeared the moisture, turning the world beyond the glass into a blur, just like my thoughts. Murky, chaotic. The hotel parking lot greeted me with a scatter of colorful lights and a line of expensive cars. I slowly moved along the rows, scanning license plates until I froze, feeling ice forming in my gut. Sarah's white BMW X3 stood in the far corner, partially hidden by overgrown evergreens. My phone chirped. A message from Sarah. Honey, I'm done. This was the most horrible evening of my life. I'm shaking with disgust. Everything will be different now. Coming home soon. I read the message several times, feeling each word burning into my brain like a hot needle. I'm done. Everything will be different now. Had she really? The phone screen blurred before my eyes. A roar filled my ears, and then a suffocating wave of rage washed over me. She really did it, really betrayed me. And now she has the nerve to share her disgusting impressions with me. The rain intensified, becoming a solid wall of water. Wind gusts rocked the tree crowns, and thunder rumbled in the distance. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, feeling something dark and uncontrollable growing inside. I opened the trunk. Among the tools, I found an old brake line. I'd recently replaced it in my car. Wire cutters gleamed in a flash of lightning. Accidents happen all the time in weather like this. My thoughts flowed cold and steady, especially on slippery roads, especially if a tire suddenly goes flat at just the wrong moment. Rain lashed at my back as I worked under my wife's car. I positioned the sharp edge of the cut hose right under the tire so it would puncture it during motion, but the air would leak gradually, enough time to get far from the hotel. Hope the ride home is unforgettable, darling, I muttered, straightening up. Soaked to the bone, I returned to my car. My hands no longer trembled. Inside was only emptiness and a strange, sick anticipation. Somewhere up there, in one of the hotel rooms, my wife had just betrayed our marriage. She doesn't know yet that she'll have to pay for it. I started the engine. Over the sound of rain came a distant roll of thunder, as if the heavens were approving my plan. Turning toward the parking lot exit, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the person looking back at me. His eyes burned with some alien, unfamiliar fire. I sat in the dark living room, slowly sipping whiskey. The glass trembled slightly in my hand, while shadows from passing cars danced on the walls. The rain had intensified, now pelting the windows with ice pellets. The clock showed just after 11. Why aren't you coming home, darling? I'd really like to know, really like to know. I whispered into the emptiness, and my own voice sounded foreign to me. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by my phone's ring. Unknown number. Nathan Walker. A woman's voice sounded official and somehow tense. Yes, that's me. This is Mass General Hospital Emergency Department. Your wife has been in an accident on Route 95. Her condition is critical. There was a man driving. Unfortunately, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The world tilted. A roar filled my ears, and the room spun before my eyes. I'll be right there. My voice seemed to come from far away. Hospital corridors greeted me with harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. I walked quickly following the signs until a middle-aged woman with tear-stained eyes blocked my path. Her expensive coat and perfect makeup, even at this late hour, marked her as the wife of someone important. Nathan, you're that employee's husband. A sharp female voice made me flinch. Mark's wife stood before me, perfect hair, designer coat, but her eyes. Her eyes were filled with such pain and fury that I involuntarily stepped back. Explain yourself. Now. Her voice broke into a shout that echoed through the hospital corridor. What was my husband doing driving your wife's car? Why was she drunk when they supposedly had a business meeting? Drunk? That word hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the ground disappearing beneath my feet. Yes, she stepped toward me, clutching my coat lapels with trembling fingers. They found so much alcohol in her blood. What was that drunk tramp doing with Mark at the hotel in the evening? And then my husband, my Mark, her voice broke into sobs. I stood there, stunned by this news. One thought kept hammering in my head. Dear God, what have I done? This wasn't how it was supposed to go at all. Nausea rose in my throat. Answer me. She shook me by the coat while tears ran down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. Did you know? Did you know they were meeting at the hotel? I remained silent, unable to speak a word. How could I explain to this woman that her husband was dead because of my revenge? Because I decided to punish an unfaithful wife. I pushed her aside, saying I needed to see my wife. In the ICU room, medical equipment beeped steadily. Sarah lay motionless, entangled in wires and tubes. Multiple fractures, but most importantly, she was alive. When I entered, she opened her eyes. The beeping of machines counted seconds in the oppressive silence of the room. I didn't want to. Her whisper was like rustling fallen leaves. I swear I really didn't want to. He said it would help. For courage. Just a couple of drinks to relax. Each of her words hit me like a slap. I leaned closer, feeling my insides twisting into an icy knot. Mark, she swallowed hard. He said, have a drink to relax. I told him I was driving. He promised he'd drive me home in my car, then call a cab. God, what an idiot I am. What a brainless idiot. Her voice broke with sobs. A tear slowly rolled down her cheek, leaving a wet trail on her pale skin. I watched her, so small and helpless now, while a hurricane of conflicting emotions raged inside me. Vindictive satisfaction mixed with guilt, fury with pity. Sarah, I felt my voice trembling. Tell me you understood I was joking then, that it was sarcasm. She stared at me with drug-hazed eyes, uncomprehending. What do you mean? When you? I stumbled when you asked permission for this meeting. I answered with mockery. I thought it was some idiotic prank. You couldn't have seriously thought. Dear God, did you really think I would let you? That I would agree to let my wife sleep with her boss? In the silence that followed, only the humming of medical equipment could be heard. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but now they reflected the horror of understanding. So you weren't giving consent. Her voice broke into a rasp and her eyes revealed an abyss of despair. Of course not, I almost shouted. How could you even think? Sarah abruptly turned to face the wall. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, making the IV pole ring ominously. The monitors started emitting a cacophony of beeping sounds. A nurse rushed in and asked me to leave. At that moment, I realized our marriage was dead. Not from infidelity, not from the accident. It died from a monstrous misunderstanding, from my sarcasm and her naive stupidity. And now an unthinkable price had been paid. I slowly rose and walked out of the room on unsteady legs. Morning sunlight mercilessly illuminated our bedroom as I methodically packed my clothes into a suitcase. Shirts, pants, socks, everything neat and orderly, as if I were preparing for a regular business trip rather than leaving forever. On the desk lay a filled-out piece of paper, divorce petition, each letter seemingly burning this new reality into my life. My eyes fell on our wedding photo in its silver frame. Happy faces, genuine smiles. It seemed so long ago. I turned the photo face down. The past should stay in the past. The rental apartment in the new development greeted me with sterile emptiness and the smell of fresh paint. The perfect place for a new life. No trace of the past, no hint of memories. I set my suitcase by the wall when my phone vibrated. A call from the hospital. I declined it without looking. Not my problems anymore, I said to the empty room. I'm starting with a clean slate. In the evening, as I was unpacking boxes of dishes, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number showed on the screen. I decided to answer, feeling a strange calmness. Hello. My voice carried the weariness of someone who had already lived through the worst. This is the why. Widow of Mark Anderson. The woman's voice broke with fury mixed with pain. I found out everything. They were in room 512. The administrator confirmed everything time, date. I have security camera footage. Your wife, that hypocrite, she went to him herself. Do you understand? By herself. I remained silent, looking out the window at an unfamiliar yard, at an unfamiliar life that would now become mine. Inside was such emptiness, as if someone had scraped everything out with a sharp spoon. Are you deaf? Can you hear me? She was almost screaming. This woman didn't just make you a cuckold, she killed my husband. If it wasn't for her, my husband would be alive. I swear, I'll personally make sure she never finds work in our industry again. She'll be cleaning toilets until retirement. As soon as she gets out of the hospital, she's out with a black mark. Are you listening to me? I ran a hand over my face. Strange, but all these revelations evoked nothing in me. No pain, no fury. As if we were talking about strangers in some second-rate soap opera. I hear you. My condolences for your loss. Do what you think is necessary. My voice sounded as lifeless as I felt. I've already filed for divorce. Her career, her problems, her life. None of it has anything to do with me anymore. Is that clear? Stunned silence fell on the other end of the line. I looked at the crack snaking across the ceiling, as crooked and wrong as my entire married life. I laughed bitterly. I'm even grateful it happened this way. For 7 years, I lived with someone wearing a mask. Thought I knew her, understood her. But it turned out, all this time, there was a complete stranger beside me. Someone capable of betrayal, of lying, and not even understanding that they're betraying. So yes, I don't care what happens to her. A week later, I sat in the notary's office, signing papers. Outside, soft snow was falling, covering the city in a white blanket of oblivion. The divorce petition will be filed tomorrow. The notary's voice sounded matter of fact, as if discussing the most ordinary transaction. Your wife will receive her copy directly at the hospital. By the way, how is her health? Haven't the slightest idea, haven't asked. Thank you. I put the documents in a folder. Hopefully, I won't have to see her again. That evening, sitting by the window of my new apartment with a glass of wine, I stared at my phone screen. Dozens of missed calls from Sarah. My finger hovered over the block contact button. One motion, and the last thread connecting me to my past life would be severed. Somewhere on the edge of consciousness flickered a thought about that fateful night, about the rain and wet asphalt, about the brake line and my revenge. But I pushed it away. Some secrets should stay buried forever. I pressed the block button. The screen displayed, contact blocked. Exactly 1 year later, I stood in South Shore Plaza, choosing Christmas gifts. Besides me, Marina, my new companion, was trying on a scarf, cheerfully talking about her holiday plans. I smiled, watching her animated face, thinking about how life has a way of surprising you. It seemed the past was finally letting go of me, and everything was falling into place. And then I saw her. Sarah stood by a store window, noticeably thinner, with premature gray in her hair. She was leaning on a cane. She noticed me too, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Hello, her voice trembled, and I froze, unable to look away from her gaunt face, from the gray strands in her once luxurious hair, from this new alien fragility in her entire figure. Hello, my own voice seemed foreign to me. A painful knot tightened in my chest. Marina, sensing something was wrong, gently touched my arm. Honey, I'll wait in the cafe. Her heels clicked away on the marble floor, leaving us alone amid the holiday bustle. We moved to the panoramic window. Outside, snow was falling, as silent as the silence between us. Sarah gripped the railing slightly tighter than necessary, leaning on her cane with the other hand. Aftermath of that accident. Nathan, I've been trying to find you all this time. Her voice was full of held-back tears. Called, wrote. I had to explain, had to tell the truth. But you disappeared from my life as if our 12 years never existed, erased me from everywhere. She turned to the window, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. You know, after the accident, when I lay there for 3 months, unable to feel my legs, I thought, this is my punishment, my cross to bear. And then the doctors said I could never have children. And you know what's the worst thing? She laughed bitterly. I can't even blame you for hating me, because you never knew. Knew what? My voice was hoarse, as if from long silence. That evening, with Mark, I couldn't do it, understand. She turned to me sharply, her eyes feverishly bright. I had a drink, we went up to the room, and then I saw myself in the mirror. Your wife, who was about to. And it just hit me. I broke down crying, locked myself in the bathroom with a bottle of martini. Sent you that text. Mark kept knocking, trying to convince me to come out, then offered to drive me home. I was in no state to drive myself. Each of her words hit like a punch. I felt nausea rising, my fingers going numb. Dear God, what have I done? I tried to call you. She took a shaky breath. Wanted to explain everything, but you blocked my number. Then the divorce where only your lawyer showed up. And Nathan, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, even for what I was planning to do. But I want you to know, I didn't betray you. Couldn't. My only guilt is that I even considered it. I need to tell you something. I began, but she interrupted. Don't. I can see you have another life now. I know you don't need a barren cripple anymore. I just wanted you to know I'm asking your forgiveness for being so stupid then. Her words crashed over me like an avalanche. There had been no infidelity, no betrayal, nothing, just my blind jealousy, my terrible revenge, a man's death and her broken life as the result. These words hit harder than any accusation. She's asking my forgiveness, not even knowing the whole truth. And even now, I can't find the courage to confess. My tongue seemed paralyzed. In my temples pounded, tell her. Tell her that you turned her into a cripple, that you destroyed everything with your own hands. You killed a man. You, not her. But all that came out was a pathetic. Of course, I don't hold anything against you. I'm glad you've recovered. She smiled weakly and slowly walked away, her cane tapping on the marble floor. Each of her uneven steps, each movement of her limping legs struck me like a whip. There it was, my revenge. There it was, my retribution. I hadn't just made her a cripple, I had punished an innocent person. For my own fantasies, for my own stupidity, for the inability to just talk. In the cafe, Marina met me with a worried look. She had never seen me like this, with eyes wet from unshed tears, with trembling hands. Everything okay? Her voice was full of genuine concern. Yes, I tried to smile, but it came out as a painful grimace. Just ghosts from the past. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering with a white shroud the traces of last year's tragedy. But I knew this ghost would never let me go. Every single day I would remember this encounter and hear her plea for forgiveness, which I actually don't deserve, and my cowardice, which can never be redeemed. This is my real personal hell, and I sentenced myself to it.